I think we can all say with clarity that we have the privilege to be here tonight, to spread our ideas, to share our stories, to force ourselves to think critically and consciously. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to make you think, to make you question what it means to pay attention and why it matters. I want you to imagine this scenario. You're walking downtown, San Diego, the sun is out, the sun is always out, it never goes away. And as you're walking, you see a man sitting on the sidewalk alone. His face is drawn, his clothes are ragged, and his possessions are gathered in a trash bag at his feet. And as you walk by, he looks up and says, "Excuse me." It's not a question, it's a plea. You barely glance at him as you hurry by. Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just witnessed is the homeless walk by. Now, there's a very logical explanation for this: bystanding, when social influence and social norms become a powerful determinant for the way we act. In this situation, the homeless man on the street, the act of bystanding comes into play because the social context of the situation becomes a powerful determinant for the way we act. The reason we walk away, this is attributed to our perceived diffusion of responsibility. The idea that in situations where we feel that we aren't capable or have no responsibility over the persons involved, we will move on in the hopes that someone more qualified will solve the issue. For example, a man has just been saved from drowning, and you don't know how to do CPR. You're not gonna jump in there, press a couple bones, and hope for the best. You're going to allow someone who knows how to perform the operation and save the person's life. Now, this is a very simple explanation to a very complicated question, and it's just one of the ways that help us understand the way people think and the reasons behind their actions. I'm going to apply this concept of bystanding to a number of non-emergency situations in which the people involved have not just been saved from drowning, they aren't in need of direct medical attention. The situations I am introducing you to are situations that pose less than an emergency, in which our brains have to determine whether to act or not. You leave the women's restroom. A girl stands crying by the sink. Her face is wet and pale, and in her left hand she holds a stick of white plastic. In her right, she clutches her stomach. You pass her on the way out, letting the door close behind you. A boy leans against the wall. He eyes the school doors warily. His fist is clenched, his jeans are torn, and there's a bruise on his cheek. You walk past him. A man stands behind the counter. He looks tired. You can see the bags under his eyes. He scans your order with shaking hands. You pay and leave. And as you leave, as you walk away, as we allow these moments to pass by, it doesn't even occur to us to ask the simple question, are you okay? Because it's moments like these that pass us by, moments that we reflect on with a tad of guilt, but all too readily move to the next best thing because it's easier to renounce something as insignificant and trivial. We don't feel responsible for people we don't know and who aren't in immediate danger. But it's moments like these where we reject a little bit of our humanity in the face of our privilege. Now, this isn't to disregard the various other factors that affect the way we act, but this is to specifically draw attention to the perceived diffusion of responsibility that we project. Because in the end, we rationalize that it's our lives that matter and we have to keep living. Because confrontation is hard to say the right thing at the right moment, hard to care about a stranger whom you have no relation to. An inherent part of American culture is self-dependence and self-reliance, the idea of making it for you, of crafting your own life in which you yourself are successful. So the conscious decision to stop and think or care about another person doesn't usually cross our minds. Some of us stop, yes, but most of us, we walk. We walk away. And I didn't come here to reprimand you and tell you to start caring. I didn't come here to say, hey, it's 3 o'clock, time to care about society. What I came here to do is actually very simple. I came here to point out an important reality: choice. Every person in this room has a choice, and you can choose to do whatever you want to do. I am simply here to tell you about it. What choices do we have, and what happens when we choose not to make a choice? What happens when we walk away? Now, I am an active participant in the Homeless Walk By. I've done it many times, but a particular experience stood out to me. At the time, I was living in a small town, and I was walking down the street. And as I was walking, I see a woman sit up from the sidewalk from where she had been sleeping. Her coat was torn, her fingernails were yellow, and you could see the dirt smeared between her wrinkles. She didn't even say anything, but I could see the question in her eyes. I walk away. And as I walk away, I hear voices behind me. Another woman has stopped, and she's well off with a fur purse and leather coat. And she says to the homeless woman, "I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't have any cash on me right now." And the old woman responds, "It's okay. It's okay. I'm glad you stopped." Even to say just that. It makes me feel like a human being. When we choose to walk away and keep moving, we have created an entire community of people who feel lesser, who feel judged, who feel subhuman. When you look at the issues that divide us today, issues that have stemmed from a long and complicated history of pain and hate, and you ask yourself, where did this come from? And how do we fix it? There are no clear answers or solutions. But when we choose to walk away, and when we choose not to choose at all because it's easier, when we become a society that chooses not to choose, we become a society that is unfeeling and isolating. Science, logic, intellect, we have convinced ourselves that we have made the right decision. Bystanding dictates as much. Ultimately, there are a multitude of reasons why we choose not to choose, and there is no right or wrong decision. But when it comes down to the human life, our collective experiences as humankind, choice begins to matter. To further examine the power behind that choice, I'd like to invite you all to play a game. So the way this is going to work is, if you feel comfortable, and I would encourage you to participate, I'm going to say a statement, and if you agree with the statement, I want you to raise your hand above your head like this. And if you disagree, I want you to keep your hand down. And if you don't feel comfortable answering, I want you to keep your hand down. Okay, we'll start off with something easy. Raise your hand if your favorite color is blue. Raise your hand if chocolate is undoubtedly the best food in existence. Raise your hand if you have ever been an active participant in the Homeless Walk By. Raise your hand if you have ever felt guilty about walking away. Raise your hand if there was ever a time in your life where you felt lost. Raise your hand if you have ever lost someone close to you. Raise your hand if you or someone you know struggles with a mental illness. Raise your hand if you or someone you know has experienced discrimination because of their race, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. Raise your hand if you have ever had to move a very long distance. Raise your hand if you've ever seen your parents cry. Raise your hand if you've ever worried about having enough food to eat, enough food to feed your family. Raise your hand if there was ever a time where you feared for your life. Raise your hand if you wish that people would be more understanding. Raise your hand if someone reached out to you when you needed it the most. Raise your hand if you wish someone would. Thank you. When you choose to walk away, to keep moving, when we become a society that chooses not to choose, we become a society that doesn't care. Do you see it now? Together, we are human. We feel, we break, we share experiences. We rise. When we rise together, we are strong. When we take the time to think, when we take the time to feel, when we take the time to pay attention to the people living, breathing, existing beside us, when we take the time, we are able to bridge the gap. We are able to build a society that feels, a society that acts, a society that cares about its people. When you choose to pay attention, you recognize that people are living their lives right next to you, that people have the capacity to understand, that you are seen and understood by people. I have one more question for you tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please raise your hand if you are a human being. Keep your hands raised. When we choose to think consciously, we build a world that is considerate, a world that is careful, a world that is worth living in, a world that is worth passing down. What we build begins with choice. And when we choose to make a choice, when we choose to pay attention, when we choose to choose, we choose to build. We choose to build something better. Thank you.